Well, the letters won't stop pouring in. Keep talking about the books you have that are about New Mexico. Don't stop thinking about tomorrow doing more videos about the books you own that are about New Mexico. Goes a song someone wrote for the channel. I'm glad that people feel that way because we've only looked at one shelf so far, and there's a gap in that shelf even from books that went to other sections. New Mexico section used to be twice as big. I had a whole tall bookcase just for Albuquerque books, and many of them went by the wayside during the purge. It had to be good stuff to stay. That's the thing about the purge. Yes, it was a time of giving away books that I regret before moving, but it was also a refining. Everything that stayed, chef's kiss, good stuff. But Mike, again, a chorus rises up, proclaiming, "You don't live in New Mexico. This is boring." To this I say, New Mexico is actually really central to a million stories. From the world of the distant past to... I saw in a YouTube video today that there was a time in the old dinosaur times when, or before that probably, when the continents were shifting around like crazy, that New Mexico was part of a small island that looked like it was being eaten by the jaws of a much larger island. And of course, the off switch for humanity was invented and created here. Sometimes I've said if Albuquerque was a person, it would have some big sins to pay for. Why do I root for this scrappy little psychopath? I believe we can do better, you know? New Mexico bookcase number 1. We looked at that top shelf. Now there's a gap there. It's unsightly. Let's move some books over from another shelf. Take them out of that pile there. And that way, I love when you take it off the top of a pile and you have your books organized this way, then you have an automatic spot for if you get something else for that category. Stack got a little haircut. Books are sitting on top there for a reason. I'm going to do a whole video about them. I think I'll do that one as a standalone. Anyway, right now we're looking at New Mexico books. Here are the ones I moved over there. Howard Bryan was a long-time Albuquerque Tribune writer. We used to have 2 newspapers in Albuquerque. That was really good and healthy for the city, different viewpoints. The Tribune was more left-leaning, and the Journal ripped them off on their joint operating agreement, forcing their closure, gaining a monopoly. It was not on the level, I remember it. Tribune and the Journal operated on a joint operating agreement, sharing the printing presses at the same facility. And if that hadn't been allowed to continue, the Tribune, which was the smaller paper, couldn't be allowed to continue. Anyway, this has some good anecdotes and things in it. Retired after 42 years as a reporter for the Albuquerque Tribune. But Albuquerque's a cool city, and it doesn't always get its credits, you know? Oh, it's a little marked up and highlighted by me when I was researching something earlier. Not cool, old me. Today I read a quote in this Pirandello collection of plays in the introduction. I'm trying to remember who the quote. It was Pascal, not Pirandello, who first said, "There's no man who differs more from another than he does from himself at another time." See, this is marked up gently with pencil for reasons. More sections have been totally rearranged. All the journals taken out. It's more pure memoir now. Biographies taken out too. Journals get to go live in the closet. Be organized later. Still haven't solved this lament configuration thing, but I know that when I do, I'll be really excited. It'll be a fun day. But you have to pass through a tunnel of books basically to get to my back room, my bedroom. Kitties, tell us about the world. Tell us about what's happening. And it's dog-eared. That was a reckless, anti-materialist phase of book owning when I owned this. It's all stuff. It's all, no book lasts forever. There's something really interesting in this book. One reason I keep it is it talks about this fake eruption of the volcanoes in the 1800s. Everyone knows about the 1940s volcano hoax, where it seemed like the volcanoes on the west side were going to go off, but it was someone burning a big pile of tires, and a partial evacuation started. A really wild story. And this mentions that, but it has, in a different part, this older 1800s account, that it was probably just someone's fire on the side, that a volcano on the west side that set it off. It would have been a prank. A similar thing was done in Alaska once, I've read about. This is interesting. Now this looks broader, but I have this because it has a great historical essay in it by Marta Weigel about the Carl Taylor murder and the penitentes in the 1930s. The Rites of Ascent, maybe? No. Chapter 15, The Penitente Brotherhood in Southwestern Fiction, Notes on Folklife Literature. Oh yeah. I think I've written more about the Carl Taylor murder than anybody that I know of, and researched it more, but Marta Weigel was the first. And before her, it was just Bob Cooper, who lived in the killer's old house up in the mountains. It's not a hugely remembered story, though I do think it had echoes. It was often in the popular press at the time. When I was 17, reading widely, 18, I dated this girl at college who liked Ayn Rand, and I was like, ugh. Now looking back about her liking that, you know, 'cause that's not work I'm crazy about. So I read those, like all the Ayn Rand books she had, and got a clear idea of what it was all about. At the time, the atheism of it was very freeing and helped get me away from some religious things going on at the time, and the selfishness kind of was under the radar. But I remember in The Fountainhead, there's this long Proustian almost sentence, or at least paragraph, that uses the penitentes as a metaphor, and you know the rites of a monk self-flagellating, walking the Stations of the Cross and whipping oneself. And I was like, I bet she knew that because that story was in circulation at the time and she read the newspapers. Collected all the headlines, and they were from all over, and there were AP stories that were reprinted everywhere. And the trial and fate of Modesta Trujillo was closely followed, more so in the state press than in the national press after a while, but still, even so, the New York Times had a couple stories. The Cleveland paper had one titled Blood Rites of the Scourges of Satan. Really interesting story. A writer killed in 1936. The penitentes, this religious whipping sect, self-flagellant sect, blamed, but it was a 15-year-old kid, but the 15-year-old kid was probably a penitente and was from a penitente family. Literally have photographs of his grandfather and father in a Murata, in Muratas. And the kid told a reporter that he wanted to be the Cristo hung on the cross at Easter. Anyway, but Marta Weigel, she's a real scholar too. I can't call myself a scholar like she is. She's an anthropologist. I'm going to end up using what I've written, which was a big 10,000 word, heavily footnoted journalistic historic article, as a part of a larger book length essay that is going to be in book 2 of my book. My working title for it is Death in the Sandias, or Death in the Mountains, something like that. And it'll be the Carl Taylor murder of 1936, happened near Cedar Crest. The Placitas hippie commune murders of the 1970s happened in Placitas at the North End. And the Hollywood video murders of the 90s. Then woven throughout it will be a personal thread about living back in the mountains again while my mom was dying. And I was becoming this researcher, historian guy, working on my first book. The Hollywood video murders, actually, like I lived on the edge of that. I remember that happening day by day, and was there when the bodies of the last victims were carted away. The mountains by my friend Laura's house. Anyway, it's gonna be a great piece because I've already got the 3 central parts, if not written, ready to be written. Carl Taylor one's written. I've got multiple articles on the hippie murders, but no, I'm gonna go. It'll be bigger and more thorough. I think there's a book on the Hollywood video murders now. I saw something on it. If not, there should be, because that was a crazy, horrible story. That's a good topic. The American self, myth, ideology, and popular culture. Really shouldn't be in the New Mexico section. It's just got one New Mexico chapter. But it's gonna stay there. Now, the New Mexico Historical Review. This is the legit historian's journal for New Mexico. This is where truth is declared, you know. Where did I get this? We got this because Durwood Ball, who was an advisor of mine too, and just an awesome guy and a teacher of mine many times, was the editor of the New Mexico Historical Review for a long time. They have an office at UNM in an older building. This rag's been around a long time. Tried to get into it back in the day. Still had some things to learn. Scholarship. That said, my Carl Taylor piece was really good. Maybe it just, I needed, I don't know. I need to look at it. I haven't looked at that in a few years. Listen to my podcast, Sitting on the Edge. There's 2 episodes in which I read that piece and we talk about it. They're episodes 2 and 3 of the podcast. There's now 110 10 episodes, so you gotta scroll back a lot. It's on Spotify, iTunes, SoundCloud. I recommend SoundCloud. Mexico Wildlife Viewing Guide. Oh, what was in here in this? The lynching of Rafael Benavides. 3 years in the life of Vicar Mackenboef. An 1873 expedition through New Mexico and Arizona. Cool. Mark Simmons, Maverick Historian of the Southwest. Oh, I've talked about him on the channel before. Yeah, cool. Historiography, history about history. Got all the contributors. Joe Sando from Jemez. Robert Torres, state historian. Guess, yeah, he's got a relative that I've interacted with. I've talked to him once or twice back when I found that inscription in the desert. Made the news. 2015, I found probably the oldest Spanish inscription in North America out in the desert. From the 1581 Chamuscata Rodriguez expedition. It says Juan de Santa Maria. And it might say Año 15 something. It's so faint. I wasn't even sure what I had seen until I took it home and did compare contrast on the computer and turned it black and white and could really make the lettering pop. It was so old and faded. And the inscription was about the same color as the rock, which was really wow. Anyway, Wildlife Viewing Guide. This is good stuff. I like to find out what's that bird, you know? What's that plant? What's that thing there? Saw a dead badger some time ago. So they're still around. Seen some creatures up in the Sandias recently too, like last summer. This, I think, is assigned as a textbook sometime, but it's cool. Man, I've never met a high schooler that was at all interested in their New Mexico history class or anything, and I'm like, don't you know this is like your mythic prequel? If you have a Spanish last name, you should be very interested. If you're indigenous, you should be interested, you know? Even some white last names, I'm all like, oh, you're a Hazeldine or whoever. This is a beautiful book I ordered online. Stuart A. Northrop. A cool thing about this is there's a hall at UNM named after him. So I'm like, I know you, pal. I walk by your name on a sign all the time. This is pretty cool, and it's helped me find some prehistoric mines out north of the Sandias, near this rock ridge, La Cuchilla, an old ghost town called Hoja de San Francisco. I was doing this thing I called map lensing for a long time, where I would use this old map to try to find things in modern day, and it was like seeing the present through the lens of an old map. And I found old stagecoach roads and everything. It was an 1875 map. There's a copy in the I think I meant to get this out. I think I already looked at this. Tony Hillerman going off about New Mexico. The spell, the lore, the lure. All true, and it's not true. It all often sits in a very uneasy balance. 2 books called River of the Sun. One about the Gila River, one a novel. But they're hanging out together. Well, it's a little windy out, so they needed a hat. So they got the pack of Albuquerque trivia cards. 4 Tonke bricks. Watch the video I did on the books of P.G. Woodhouse. I go off on Tonke bricks for like 15 or 20 minutes. But they're pretty cool. Do a video on Tonke books next to move these Tonke books over to the other case so we can look at this shelf. Surrounded by books and also by deconstructed images of the book. What does it mean, you know? Also by books rendered unreadable, rendered objects. It might be too much for everyone to handle, you know? It's a lot to think about. And I just took a chunk out of there. Halo chunk. Mexico. Daughter's way over here, living as an exchange student in Germany. Oh, Anodyne, I miss you. Have great adventures. You 3 have represented this firm's interests so well recently, we're going to make you all partners. BP, attorney at law. Prismo. And the entity known only as the enforcer. We appreciate you, kitties. Your service is noted. Collection is ever evolving, ever being pruned. Books are being put into their more correct sections, but the sections remain pretty eclectic, I gotta say. This is general nonfiction. Some unlikely fellows rub shoulders here. Fellas and dames. All sorts. Yeah, like the collection is organized, but it's still eclectic. It's not alphabetized. Not every subtopic has a section. I have to work with a limited number of cases and shelves. 20 cases altogether, but some of them really are just like one shelf of antique books a case, you know. Side of this case a case. There was a squirrel on the night of... Anyway. Probably all going out like the end of Rogue One, but let's enjoy it while we can, you know. So excited now I can fit... Now that the genre books have their own section, shelf, I can fit more sci-fi on here. You know, horizontal, under the stacks. Moving on, we're looking at New Mexico books. Section has stuff like this that I hate. Aesthetically, tactily, in every way it bothers me, but it does keep a really rare book safe. And the Public Service Company of New Mexico's power company wanted to put their lines through the site of the ghost town of Hagen, New Mexico, just north of the Sandia Mountains, which are east of Albuquerque in central New Mexico. Had to do an archaeological site survey first. I've talked to some of the people that were involved in this survey because I'm a researcher and I've written all kinds of things about Hagen. My son is named Hagen after this town. I was obsessed with this town for a long time. I wrote a personal essay called Start Breaking My Heart that's on the Unoya Review. It's partly about my relationship with that town, which I shared with a sibling, and then brother, now sister, then Jeff, now Jess. Hagen was like a town I discovered with friends for ourselves. We were just driving around, ghost town dirt roads, and we found this like huge adobe town. We didn't know what it was when we were first looking at it. We looked at the ruins of the walls and pillars and safe of the Mercantile, the old Mercantile store, once the largest adobe building in the Southwest. This is the commercial half of town here. It's not shown here. This is where the power plant was. I've slept on the roof of that building many times. And the chimneys there are really fun to climb up, though the stacks are missing. Back in the day, it must have been really... I mean, I can see why they had a residential and a commercial half, but it seems like no matter where you were, it'd be like living in Page, Arizona, next to the Navajo generating station back in the day. This is full of documents. Hagen has 7 miles of tunnels underneath it. I once had the opportunity to go down in it when the rain widened a coyote hole next to an old filled-in mine shaft. But I was like, man, they had collapses back then. I just couldn't risk myself. I'm not as brave as that ghost town living guy on YouTube. Cerro Gordo, California. You know, Hagen, the town, was a huge part of my life for the longest time. And then it's really interesting. My son just replaced it. He became the Hagen. Around the same time he was growing up, access to the place kept getting more and more difficult. And I remained poor and, you know, with worse cars, unable to go out there all the time. But this book was invaluable. I bought this for like $75 off eBay the first time. I bought it a couple of times. What happened to the first one? Got destroyed somehow. But I think I ended up buying 2, and I gave the second copy maybe to Ty. But this is a keeper. There's only like 500 copies of this that exist. But this, if you want to become a scholar of Hagen, which is featured in The Maze Runner, The Scorch Trials, also Only the Brave about the Granite Mountain firefighters, also a Tina Fey movie about Afghanistan, also, what was that one called? Wisco Tango Foxtrot. A really picturesque spot. It's probably been in other movies too, but love it. Hagen was a little coal mining town, grew to be pretty big in the 20s, with a population of 700 and others bustling around that lived in Bernalillo and the surrounding area. It had Prohibition-era bars, but no churches. Had a little orchestra and saloon playing group. The last resident lived there into the 1950s wearing his World War I doughboy outfit, mining and filling a truck bed with coal. The town started to fall apart around the time of the 1940 census, probably before that when the seams began running out, getting rocky. The railroad spur that had been built out there pulled out. Hagen died a slow death. I've often thought it'd be cool to bring it back to life. Even before I started watching those Cerro Gordo videos from the guy Brent. I do kind of recommend it. It's a really interesting saga to watch and a lot of really interesting history of that channel. He's kind of fearless about the mines. But Hagen's a special place. I've had so many crazy, awesome experiences out there. My life has happened out there. Several chapters of my book will be about it. I rediscovered its name when it was lost to history. Nobody knew who it was named after. Both New Mexico place name books said the place name origin of Hagen has been lost. I found it. I found it in the mining records of this coal mining company. And he was a rich Pittsburgh steel magnate named William C. Hagen. and memorabilia of him and his companies that my son has. A really cool 1940 Saturday Evening Post ad for the Hagen Corporation, now framed. I found so many things out there, seen so many things out there. Definitely some of the old bottles that if I still have, were from somewhere around there. A railroad spike from the Rio Grande Eastern Spur Railroad. It could be an opium bottle from the area, but I'm not sure. Can I add those feathers? I need feathers for some. From a gypsum mine out there. Oh, that's another movie that's filmed around there. You can see this mine's opening, the borehole, in the background shots of an Arizona scene in the movie The Glass Castle. They use that road for the Arizona scenes. But that's an amazing... Oh, more. That gypsum mine is still active. Now they use dynamite and big trucks on the other side of it, not in the borehole part that you can see from the road that looks like a scenic cave. It is impossible to reach. I've never been able to get up or down to it. It just is too high and flat around it, but it's cool, and there's lots of this at the base of it. Gypsum, or jaspe, as the local Spanish speakers called it, was the basis of whitewash, and all the little beautiful adobe homes were whitewashed inside and sometimes out. Jaspe. Many of the little towns in the Sandias were jaspe mining towns, like Unidagato, which Bandelier wrote about, and most of his description about it is just complaining about his host's wife. Never have I met such an unpleasant person. He also tells a story in that one of a boy getting killed by a wolf in the area. I think this might be from out there. This might be from the Elm House. We always thought it was the blacksmith's house because it's got an indoor forest of invasive trees that completely fill these old stone walls built on the outskirts of town, and there's a lot of blacksmith type residue all around in piles of rust, etc. Bits of metal and glass. Wait, if you ever go out to this place, I'm scared to go out now. I bet it's so developed out there, and there have been problems with gates on the roads. The gates are illegal. That road is a public thoroughfare. Whether it's the tribe blocking it off or the Diamond Tail Ranch or whoever out there, they're not supposed to do that. That's supposed to be a public thoroughfare. Hello, tribe. White guy here. Yeah, I know it sounds bad, but I guess on some level I kind of feel like that time in my life where I really obsessed about that area is gone, and Hagen, the person, really did become the Hagen for me. But I still do love that spot on the earth. I think it's a magical place. A deep time out there, way beyond any human settlements. Alameda Road, I used to say, greatest dirt road in the world. This is, what do you call a book like this? Real niche, small-time anthropological thing, but it's of these towns that no one else is writing about. And so here we go. What is this? Historic Resources Reconnaissance Survey of the Manzano and Sandia Mountain Villages. State Historic Preservation Division, Office of Cultural Affairs, 1994. So yeah, look, I got him to sign it, because I would run into him at the Center for Southwest Research sometime. I'd always get a little starstruck because I knew he was this great researcher, and that he'd written The Myth of Santa Fe, which is a great key New Mexico book. When you think about New Mexico, you have to think about really big themes. Honestly, it's some of the same themes I'm seeing in this Luigi Pirandello play I'm reading right now. Loyola, what's it? La-Ola. Idea of copies becoming more real than the real thing. Mexico lives with that. It's a strange place of image. Its history was driven by the image. Yeah, I saw 7 golden cities. Are you sure, Esteban the Moor? They were up that way. Do you think you saw the sun glinting off some adobe buildings? That's so cool. He was like, you copied this whole thing from some file and had it bound. These are my favorite. I love clamp style bindings. They no longer exist. So you could write something on the side so you can know what it is. Like a spiral. But this is like, there's a whole chapter on each one of the little communities up in the Sandias. And my book is called Towns of the Sandia Mountains. So this was an invaluable resource. And it's mentioned in my selected bibliography. My book, which Squirrel co-wrote, so I can see why she would want to show up while I'm talking about it. Honestly, if you ever write about the towns of the Sandia Mountains or you want to know all about them, read all the books listed in the selected bibliography. That's a pretty good roundup of Sandia Mountain literature right there. If we're going to make an anthology of Sandia Mountain literature, I'd start with this list. Chris Wilson. Chris. Historic Resources Reconnaissance Survey of the Manzano and Sandia Mountain Villages, Santa Fe, New Mexico. State Historic Preservation Division, Office of Cultural Affairs, 1994. The book was a school for me. Gave me my major theme in my workplace. One of it anyway, you know. Everything goes with place. Time, course of humanity. Anyway, hugely useful book, full of useful facts. Oh, Larry Glazebrook. Cienega Springs. I've always been convinced that's an English mispronunciation of Cienega, which means swamp. North end of the Sandia is a really interesting, cool cave. Sandia Cave. You reach it now by metal stairs. It's amazing. Here's a staple-bound one I got from, looks like UNM Library. I'm a funny sort of scholar. There's not a ton of things out there about Sandia Cave, even though it's really central. At one point, that was considered such... Oh, the cat got my water. Come on, cat. But, Sandia Cave is an amazing spot. I love the... I love the north end of the Sandias. It's such a shadowy, haunted, amazing area. It's how it feels anyway, and it's incredible. This is an Eastern New Mexico University thing. The thing is Frank Ibben was a big showboat and fraud, this archaeologist that claimed to find human remains in that cave. Might it have been visited by prehistoric peoples? Though I hate that term. The ancestral peoples of the area. But this guy was a big phony. He would sprinkle yellow pollen, which was all over the floor of the cave, onto artifacts acquired from elsewhere. Sometimes he'd leave numbers from the labs that he bought them on, and stickers and things, and grad students would find him. He got caught doing it in Alaska, too. It should surprise no one. He was a vicious, big game hunter, and just killed all the time. Not my favorite trait of Hemingway's, either. He even had a show on ABC for a while called Frank Ibben on Safari. I've toured his home. UNM is real quiet about the scandal of Frank Ibben, and that this cave that was thought to be the earliest documented site of prehistoric history on the North American continent was a big hoax. But the whole world and UNM kind of responded with a quiet, "Oh, really? Huh." There was a scathing New Yorker article, I think by Douglas Preston, who's also a famous author, sci-fi thrillers and stuff. This guy. That guy. But, yeah, I've toured Ibben's house. One time some friends and I, including the anthropologist Bill DeWan, we put together a pilot called Strange New West, and it was going to be like a travel show around the Southwest where we look at unusual stories. And one was the Sandia Cave and the Frank Ibben controversy. I think that was the first one we filmed. There's some great photos from it. It was me and Bill and Felicia and Stephanie. Who were like local personalities. They're great. They're like dancers and models and actors. We filmed this great episode. We did the Carl Taylor murder in the Sandias, and we did the ghosts of Civil War soldiers reported from 1862 in an area of San Antonio by Cedar Crest. And it was really fun, and it would have been a super cool show, but we didn't know that our editor, who was pretty key to the whole project, super cool guy, that he was drinking himself to death, and he died of cirrhosis while we were editing it all together. Strange New West never lived, and Bill moved to California, and I think I got depressed for a few years and disappeared. No, not that, but it was like, kind of. But UNM just got a lot from Frank Ibben. He gave them so much stuff. He gave them his house. He gave them, there's a whole wing of the school named after him. But I think he gave them so much that they don't really want to be too public in their apologies and renunciations of the guy. It's kind of like he got to keep a good reputation despite spotty life. I've heard he had really, really far-right leaning politics. He was friends with Walt Disney and had a drawing inside his house that I've seen that included a swastika, which I thought was kind of interesting, in the context of like Mickey Mouse beating Hitler or something. But Frank Ibben, yeah, there's big personalities across these books. I didn't even get into J.J. DePraslin when I was looking at this Hagen book, this dapper Louisiana dandy, infamous womanizer who kind of owned in the town, or the famous architect, famous Hispanic architect, what's his name? I can't believe I'm forgetting that. Who redesigned the town in the 20s and made it the beautiful place it became for a while. For a long time I was obsessed with the idea of a ghost town, the idea of, nature reclaiming a place. It's kind of beautiful. Only 2 copies of this came into my life. How did that happen? Gave one to Ty and he already had it too. I didn't think it was that common. Historic Albuquerque Today. Sometime maybe I'll try to go see everything in this. I've seen most of it. Oh, this is what I was so happy about. It has a scan of the first map of the area. I love that map. This map was by Miera y Pacheco. He was the map maker for the 1776 Dominguez Escalante expedition, which was a Spanish religious mission that left Santa Fe, New Mexico for Monterey, California. Ultimately traveled a 6-month, 2,000-mile loop was not a success. Everybody was demoted. People had barely survived. They ate all their horses and animals along the way because it was not going well. But here's the Via de Albuquerque. This is from 1776. Here's where I live, these 4 hills over here. Oh, no. These 4 hills here. These hills here. Right there. Wait, am I showing you? Yeah. Those 4 hills. I live in the 4 Hills area. That's the first depiction that I know of the 4 Hills. Pretty cool. The Zandias. That's very interesting that it's spelled with a Z that way. Alcaldía de la Villa. Yeah, it was a pretty small place. Oh, I love this map. This map's in my book too. It's great. I had to pay I think that was like $80 from an archive for that. For anthropological studies. Yeah, I never got to handle the original map, which I really wanted to. Nope. A scan ready to go. This is what they call a calendar. It's not a book. Could I hang this up in some way? Could I cut it up? Would that be doing a historic disservice? Wouldn't want to frame every page, but some. I bought this. Yeah, this is a historic resource, never mind. The founder of Cedar Crest had this interesting chapter where he moved to a nearby town for a while, Carnwell, in Terrace Canyon, and ran a trading post. I remember talking with the current owners of this house, and they told me all the cool stuff they'd found, like paint under this or that, from different designs and sizes. One book said he had a spider web tattooed on his hand during this time, but his daughter, who I showed around the old Cedar Crest resort, was like, no, he didn't. The East Mountain Historical Society was around before and when I was putting my book together, but they've really rose to prominence. I hope I gave them a little boost. I was mentioned in many of their earlier newsletters, my book, but I just didn't stay living up there, so it's hard to... I got a contract to write a second book about the Sandia Mountains. I wanted to call it Lost Towns of the Sandia Mountains. They made me call it Sandia Mountain Settlements. And I would get up to the mountains to do it, to do the footwork needed to make that book happen, even though there are a bunch of other little towns like Casa Loma and Camp F8N and Sandia and other towns that I thought needed more attention. Like I was going to have one on, one of the Placitas hippie communes in particular, because those are towns in themselves. There's Lower Farm, Tawapa, Minerva Nueva, Dome Valley. It's towns like Forest Park, my favorite ruins. A ghost town in the town of Cedar Crest, if you know where to look. Cabins, grown through parking lot. Anyway, so much. I just ran that contract out. I just didn't do it. And there were newspaper articles about that book coming out, but the book never came out. So it coincided with the end of my first marriage. I was not happy. I was feeling sad. Here is this is a cool one. Historic photos of Albuquerque. This is from kind of a corporate entity. Once these Images of America books started doing well, there was kind of blood in the water for people that thought they could knock these kind of books out. And there were a number of different companies like that. And some of them were like almost on the AI spectrum. They were so basic that people would just plow through existing books and easy to find stuff and look through one archive and put the most basic information around it. I don't think this one is that way. I got sent this back in the day when I was a online book reviewer and would get sent boxes of stuff and things to review. I don't know that did I ever write a review? Maybe. But it's a beautiful book of old Albuquerque. The city I live in. No, it's not that one. But it is very influenced by LA. Wow. Having stuff like this. Maybe I should have coffee table books featured in my place once in a while. 1.5 visitors a year I receive. A cool book to own. I'd like to have all the books on filmmaking in New Mexico. I think I've read them all. There's 3 others. There's more than that, but there's 3 like significant ones that I'm thinking of. Because I wrote an article for Control P Publishing in the Sandoval Signpost on the history of filmmaking in Sandoval County. And you can't just look at one county's history when you're looking at something. Found any place that had anything on it, and I read about films. Anyway, this is a great one. This was a New Mexico magazine publication back in the day, but I found out about some movies here that I didn't find for years. Like this is where I first heard of Track of the Moon Beast, the 1970s Z horror film that was the last thing written by Batman co-creator Bill Finger, and an early work of special effects by Rick Baker, who became a legend with American Werewolf in London. Some good stuff in here. and I like to track things down. What are the best movies filmed in New Mexico? I love Ace in the Hole. That's a classic. And for Albuquerque, this is pretty Albuquerque. Billy Wilder satire from the 1940s. Only the Brave, that's a good one with Kirk Douglas, based on an Edward Abbey story, The Brave Cowboy. I'm watching this one, The Bottom of the World, that's filmed entirely in Gallup at this restaurant hotel that, at least so far, I went to with some frequency working at the summer camp last summer near there. Pretty cool. Rancho Motel. Take track of the Moonbeast. It's pretty good. I mean, it's weird. It's, you know, I don't know if any of you are familiar with that old YouTube phenomenon, Wizard People, Dear Reader, where somebody narrates like a book on tape of the action over the first Harry Potter movie. It's so funny. There's two versions. One's especially funny. But what if I did that for Track of the Moonbeast, but completely seriously? Like, took it, instead of making it a joke, thought about it philosophically, and how like these characters are doing all these stupid actions seemingly against their will and suffering for it. And what if I treated the whole thing as a meditation on free will and determinism? How to succeed, so you just trip on nothing and you can't get up, you can't go on. It's a scene in that movie. The first movie filmed in New Mexico was probably, that was definitely Indian Day School, filmed at Isla de Pueblo. It's just kids going in and out of a school, smiling and laughing. Probably the ancestors of people that still live around here today. Thomas Edison's acolytes came out and filmed it. You know, the Dominguez Escalante expedition. I'm way interested in them, and I first got interested in them because I canoed around the circumference of Lake Powell a long time ago, over almost 7 months, and they crossed through Glen Canyon there at a famous point called the Crossing of the Fathers. Now there's a bay over it called Padre Bay. I think it was while listening to a radio report about them while I was on that lake, when I was right by where they had crossed that reservoir, that I really had that first great jolt of this history was right here. This happened. Which is wild, because as a little kid, I grew up in Europe and was in like castles and stuff all the time. I remember sitting in the prison cell that Richard the Lionheart had sat in for a long time, where he whistled and got rescued when his whistle was recognized. Or I remember sitting in the car, because I was a little kid and got into everything, that the Archduke Ferdinand was assassinated in. Oh, vroom vroom. It was not until that moment on the lake when I was, must have been like 20, I had that moment. This was right here, and this place is transformed by my knowing this. Oh, paintings by Wilson Hurley. He was this great eccentric artist that lived in a nice part of the Sandia foothills, Sandia Heights, and painted the mountains all the time. His paintings are all around the city. My bank has one in the lobby. The airport has a couple. He's got a great style. Really cool he did this. He must have had connects at UNM Press. Yeah, New Mexico gets some good painters. But this is a beautiful book. I bought this when I went out of my way to buy this one. I got this at the Antique Mall. You know, they have different booths and things at those sorts of places. Something that should probably be in a closet, but it's pretty relevant to New Mexico. I once got hired by the Forest Service to write a 6-month study on Sabino Canyon. I have so many different connections to now, so many memories and strange experiences and things that have happened around there. My history with Sabino has gone so far beyond this project that this project is, one day the tale will be told. Sabino at first glance seems like a pretty unexceptional little dot on the map right now. It's tiny. It's kind of a sister city of Cedro, which is still a dot on the map. Cedro Peak is out there. It's in the Manzano Mountains. A somewhat dry, less than maybe spectacular natural area, very low-key in its way, but kind of magical at the same time. But Sabino was a town in different chapters, and some of the chapters were so interesting, and this little nowhere dot on the map yielded so much stuff that was so interesting. Its earliest chapters were indigenous, of course. Then town of Sabino was first declared. It was El Sabino de somebody, this guy that founded it, in the early 1800s, and that area is just rocks. There's nothing left. You can kind of see a flat area where there's some rocks. Then in the 1920s, it became a fox farm. This really prominent guy who sold all the music gear in town, Riedling, A.I. Riedling Music was a big deal here. He had a place up there, farmed foxes. Later, this kind of mad scientist who helped develop plastic veins, not always mad, but race and immortality obsessed, collaborated with Charles Lindbergh while based out of there. There's a book about it called The Immortalists. think I would have gotten rid of that book. Would that be in the science section or the general nonfiction? It's very interesting. So when I was out there, I found this cursed thing I can't get rid of. Giant picture of the scientist's kids. It's just out there in an abandoned building. I've tried to turn it over to the Historical Society a couple times and it didn't work out. Try again sometime. Shep, Weedy, and Flip. Best friends. They weren't even related. Back in the aughts, I spent so many hours in... this is like kind of my lab, I guess, too. Pretty much every bit of information that I could find about Sabino, New Mexico is in here. It's like a bunch of internet printouts. Did the aughts love internet printing out or what? Everyone had an inkjet. I went to the Masonic Lodge. They had great records on Riedling, who lived there. Found some really interesting stuff here. They were trying to get me to join. And I spent so much time at the Albuquerque Journal's archives. Got old phone books in here from the downtown library. Found some good stuff online too. Other books in the Center for Southwest Research. Oh, Delco light plants. That was the whole thing. There was one of those out there. Yeah, these farmers used to set out just these big cubes of electric light in the early days so they could work into the night. Delco light plants were like a thing. You'd have a little light shed. Filmmakers have not used that well enough yet. Could be really cool. People working at night by a big cube of light. All old-fashioned style. I have one standard when judging a New Mexico ghost town book. Does it include Hagen? If it doesn't, I know it's a slapdash affair. This does. Philip Varney. I know about that guy. That name's familiar. Oh, I've seen it written on walls at Hagen from the 70s when he was putting this book together. I think that's the guy. In 1981. I think he wrote his name in the safe at Hagen. Chloride. I wrote an article about chloride. They had a prophetess that predicted that preached that the town would be destroyed by a flood. And it was destroyed by a flood. But it was in an area prone to floods. So what do you do? But let's see. I know so many stories about it. It's a great place. Fascinating book. I had to buy this. I got this at Hastings back in the day, a regional southwestern chain that no longer exists, sadly. Probably because of private equity. These are color photos of Pie Town. During my first marriage, we used to go climbing in Pie Town and daddle near there all the time. The Continental Divide Trail goes through there. But color photography has been around a long time. It just used to be really expensive. And these are such beautiful, rich photos. I've had like eerie, transcendent moments with these where the past collapsed into the present just from sitting and looking at them. I was transformed. Spend some time with color photos. You can see like color photos of the Prussian War and stuff. Like what? Artfully presented too. But you got to do stuff like that too when you get a vertical and you have a landscape space to fill. Wow. And this is a cool photo book I tracked down because I was told by the owner of the Cerrillos Turquoise Museum that there were photos of the area in here. They're beautiful. Santo Domingo. Maybe I'll put this up. Why not have a few things of the area? It's not appropriative. I love the towns of New Mexico. Villages and pueblos, and it's a beautiful picture. It's a great old photo from Cerrillos, where Young Guns 2 was filmed. But this is in 1940, long before that. Cerrillos is the last active ancient turquoise mine that's still being worked today. Porter is a pretty great photographer, best known for his work with the Sierra Club, lamenting and fundraising for Glen Canyon. Book The Place No One Knew is considered a canonical Glen Canyon book. But here he was. Oh yeah, and this, I always thought this was near where I lived, and I thought I knew where it was, but I've never been sure. That one. I'm like, that's one end of La Madera Road by Puertecito. La Plaza. But I don't know if it is. It just looks a lot like that. Looks a lot like a La Madera roadside too. There's stuff in this book where I'm just like, I know you were in that area because you were in Cerrillos. Is that it? But beautiful book of old photos. Delivering rugs. I noticed the collections of the rich had a lot more photo books. Look, even mine have marks that say bargain bin. Oh, still, I take pride in my collection, and it's curated and thought out, and I feel connected to most of it. It's a famous book. I mean, statewide, New Mexico then and now. This is like the first then and now I can think of for New Mexico. Finding, I'm sorry. I got one image suggested to me from this book when I did my book, and it's the oldest image taken into Harris Canyon in the Sandias, even in 1870. The Sandias then, 1917. Sandias today. Is that Los Altos skate park in front of it? Funny. The bridges used to be so temporary because of all the flooding. I find the one I was looking for, but it doesn't matter. Right. Well, Squirrel says hello. Gizmo and Sweet Pea say hello. Gizmo blesses you with her mind rays. Sweet Pea blesses you with her mind rays as well. It's a wild card. Watch out for those mind rays. Can't tell you what's coming in. Right. Books about New Mexico. There's still more. If you're not from here, what are you getting out of this? Anything? If you are from here, maybe you're getting a little something out of it. It'll make you care more about where you live and cool specific stuff over there. Alright, sorry, we've got, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We had 10 more videos about New Mexico books, sorry. Maybe we'll break it up. Maybe we'll do half the case, one case, and then something else for a little while. That's a good idea. So, alright, New Mexico books coming your way. If you want to hear me talk about something else, go back and look at old videos. I've pretty much looked at most of the collection by now. There's over 300 videos on this channel. YouTube is suppressing it and keeping it down because I don't say I unalived or whatever. Instead, talk directly about all the crimes I've committed. I don't like the language. I think it's silly that so many adults are trying to talk like children so they can keep a G rating. What are you doing? If enough people didn't care about that stuff, they'd cut it out. They'd realize it's annoying. YouTube would. Join me in protest like Squirrel is. Look at her, she's on strike. Pause up if you agree. Pause up if you agree. Pause up if you agree. Squirrel, this is a beautiful display. Just so obvious you care about justice. Gizmo, recently your daughter was posing rather provocatively. Do you have a problem with this? Evidently not. Sweet Pea, send your greetings to Anodyne in Germany if she happens to ever see this. This whistles for if the cats get too rowdy. I've got to send for help.